All right, bye week ahead of Nebraska and Indiana next Saturday. Lots on the Hoosiers and Huskers next week in a big game that'll have a lot of national attention. Probably the same as Alabama, Tennessee, and Texas and Georgia. I would imagine that. As we welcome in Steve Sipple from Husker Online on 3 and 93.7 The Ticket. Good morning, Sip. You're on with myself and a guy by the name of Matt McMaster.
Hi, Matt.
Hey, Steve. How are you?
Good. Thank you. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing great.
Good. Do you two have history?
I don't think so.
No, we
Okay.
don't have any history.
All right.
I like Steve. Steve's a great guy. I'll tell you this right now. As a young guy, as a young part-timer, Steve, I thought I was afraid of Steve Sipple because he was this great, incredible writer. He could not have been more nice and more caring and more, I don't know, example. Like he's a great, Steve, you were a great example of how to be in press conferences and how to act as a professional. So I want to compliment you on that.
Wow, thank you, Matt. I appreciate that. I did not expect that. I usually don't get any form of praise, so I appreciate it.
You're very welcome, Steve. It's kind of sad, but I will be here to compliment you more if you need it because you deserve it.
God bless you. I appreciate those words.
Of course.
All
Steve.
right. You've got your own hype man that's on 1620.
Team Steve Sipple.
Mid-season review. What's your vibe compared to the vibe of your readers and viewers?
Ooh.
Is it
Similar.
different? Okay.
Similar. We've been around each other a long time, Gary. I'm probably inclined more towards optimism. I like the team. I like this team. And I think this is going to come down to, I'm also very grounded in realism.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say it's just going to be a lot of close games. You guys know that.
Yeah.
We all know what's going to happen. And in that way, we don't know what's going to happen in terms of outcomes, but we know Nebraska is going to be in basically every game. And I know you're thinking Ohio State, maybe not, but other than that, it's fun. It's fun because this team is very competitive. It's got a real defense that I think, could get better. It's already very good. I think it's trending towards, a defense that will continue to evolve in the direction of getting better. Now, you hope that's what the offense does too, and obviously the rough conversation of special teams.
Steve, listening to you on the various, platforms that you're on in the offseason, I always thought that you were a guy who I wouldn't say was, I'll say this, you're a little bit higher than most in Dylan Raiola. You definitely had more confidence in him, not only as a player, but as a leader as well, and talked about how his demeanor and how he was ready and how he walked into the building. Now that we're through 6 games of this season, is there anything that has surprised you about his play up to this point?
The only thing that's really surprised me is his struggle against Rutgers.
Yeah.
No, this is, and you're right. I was very confident in Dylan, Matt.
Yeah.
Because I know Dominic very well. And I think the big thing was going to Hawaii to see him in the Polynesian Bowl. Was around him a lot. Saw him not only in the game, but we were at those practices. So you saw so much. You saw when you're at a practice for a couple hours, and then you see him before practice, and you see him after practice. You see him operate during the practice with high level athletes. This is the Polynesian Bowl's 4- and 5-star guys. They're excellent, and to see him operate, anybody would have came away confident. He just comports himself so well. He's big. He's a big kid, so he's an alpha, but kind of a low key alpha. I thought that trait, that low key alpha, would work very well as a freshman coming in because he wouldn't try to take over everything. He kind of knew what to do, how to assimilate without being overbearing as a young guy. And then the big thing is, though, and you saw it in Hawaii. Now you heard about it. You've heard about it. He's just his willingness to prepare.
Yeah.
And what that does, guys, is it's hard not to respect him whether you're 24 years old or you're 17 years old. This is his. He's ready. He's very diligent and he's very serious. So he's easy to respect. So I figured all that would work out really well.
What's and the offense has the lack of consistent push up front or issues with the running back. They just when one's going well, it doesn't seem like the other, or when they're on the same page, it doesn't seem like it's sustained. But in terms of Dylan in this offense with the passing game and just the operation, what in the next 6 weeks coming out of a bye week where there's a lot of self-scouting going on, what do you think is an element of this offense that might be a tinge different from here on out, of something they've learned prior, strengths and weaknesses?
It's so hard to answer. It's a great question because that's the key question. I mean, I think it's a great question because they have to find a little something, or maybe the best way to answer it is the thing I'm always thinking in my brain, and I sometimes will say it, is I got to narrow the focus a little bit. That's like I'm a kind of a broken record because I feel like I've been saying that since the Pelini era, since Tim Beck was the guy. And I hate doing that identity thing. It's such a low hanging fruit. But I would say I'd like to see them kind of clear up their identity a little bit. They try to use a lot of guys. I'd like to see the ball go to fewer guys almost. I mean, get the ball to Nayor more, Banks more, Barney more. I always say Carter Nelson, but then when I do that, I start kind of doing what they do. I think they feel like they need to get the ball to so many different people. There's this need. They feel like they get the ball to Heinrich Harburg. I mean,
who needs a touch?
I wish they would narrow the focus a little bit. That's just now. Listen, I don't hear that from anybody. That's just my own personal opinion. But I'd like to see the focus narrowed a little bit.
No, I'm with you. I think the key word is like, can you split the workload among your main playmakers?
Yeah.
I think you and I talked last week. Langsdorff always had this phrase of, all right, who needs a touch when he was calling plays? And it almost seems like it can get into that. We have a lot of guys that do a lot of different things. Let's see if we can all use them, instead of let's focus on our main guys and let's just feed them until they're full.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what I'm talking about. I get it at running back. Those guys are all they're all pretty even in terms of talent. They're different. They're all different. They're all a little bit different, but I get that. But nobody's really separated. I think it's more of a conversation about, like, I didn't even mention Fedoni, but yeah, I mean, and while we're talking about that, I would like to see Fedoni a little bit more involved. I think he has 14 catches. He's the fifth leading receiver. I thought there'd be more Fedoni. It's not something that I think is absolutely critical, but I'd like to see a little bit more of that. But I just would just wrap it up by saying narrow the focus a little bit.
We had a caller come in earlier, Steve, and say, Nebraska's 5-1, but he and other people that he talked to, it doesn't feel like they're 5-1. It feels like they're a little worse than 5-1. What do you say to that type of statement, to that sentiment? Do you think that this is a 5-1 team that's 5-1, or do you think that this maybe they've gotten away with some poor play in the first half against Purdue, and they got away with?
I think it's no, Matt. And that's a good question. I think they're legit 5-1. I loved what Rule said earlier in the week, where he just slipped stuff into conversation, but he said that Illinois loss keeps him up at night, or he loses sleep. I guess he said, I lose sleep over the Illinois loss. And the reason I bring that up is because they're close to being 6-0. I mean, So yeah, I think 5-1's legitimate if you can say that 6-0 was, they have an overtime loss. 6-0 is very much in the cards. And I would tell you this: my biggest disappointment of the season was that overtime.
Yeah,
I was just incredibly disappointed with that, because I thought, here's a grand reset. I always look at overtime that way. It's just a big reset. especially when you're talking about a team that kind of struggled in the second half like Nebraska did. And I thought, okay, they're really going to dig in here. And they did. I mean, it was like Matt said, it was a debacle.
Yeah.
But no, to answer your question, I see Nebraska as a legitimate 5-1. If you just got to look around the country a little bit, it's 5-1. You don't see much dominance, is what I'm getting at.
Sure.
So if you're expecting a team like Nebraska to be a dominant 5-1, if you're expecting anybody to be a dominant 5-1, good luck. You're not seeing a lot of that out there.
So that night against Illinois was 31 points were on the board. Since then, 10, 7, still no rushing touchdowns allowed. What do you think happened to the operation of the defense post Illinois, where they got back to looking like they are, and it's maybe a different tone because Rule talked about Tony got out of his comfort zone. What do you think? What do you think happened post Illinois with defense?
Well, don't you naturally wonder, guys, if he was forced out of his comfort zone a little bit, maybe by the boss?
Yeah,
I think he was, which is fine.
Maybe. I mean, it's possible Tony did it on his own. Very possible, right? But it makes you wonder, that's one thing that definitely happened against Rutgers. I wonder how much of that happened against Purdue. I don't know. You had to do too much against Purdue. But I think that the players, and you heard this in the post game after the Rutgers game, I thought they kind of took stock of themselves after the Illinois game. And Ty Robinson talked about it. It was so great to hear him talk about it, that they were disgusted and with their play against Illinois. And why do I say I was kind of heartened by it? Because I didn't think that looked like what we thought this defense would look like. And they didn't either. Okay, so that's why I say I felt good to hear him say that, because I think as a collective, the fan base didn't really. That's not what they expected. And then the last two games happened, and that did look like what we expected.
Yeah.
So now they got big tests coming up, and they're not always going to hold teams to 7 and 3 and 10. They're not going to do that. It's going to be hard to do that against Indiana and Ohio State and USC. Really hard. But I'll tell you one thing: they're going to give you a chance.
Mm-hmm.
I would say even in Columbus, that defense I think is good enough to give you a chance. And again, I think it's getting better. So I'm really excited to see what that looks like as the schedule goes forward. But the one thing I'm going to do is guard against, if Ohio State puts a big number on them, I'm not going to say, oh God, I was wrong.
Sure.
No, because there's a huge part of the schedule left. They'll dig in and hold teams down. That's what they're about.
So I want to continue with the Tony White conversation, because you both brought up, getting him out of his comfort zone. I thought, Steve, that his game plan against Rutgers was a masterclass, and I was really impressed with his use of a 5-man front, right, and disguising that 5-man front, and really, I think, putting the Rutgers OC in a bit of a pretzel and forcing him to go away from Kyle Monungai, right, with the disguises they were using, and throwing it more with Ethan Kaliakmanis. And with White, if he's a guy where he's going to be a head coaching candidate come the offseason, do you have a read on that? Do you think that there are jobs out there that fit him? Do you think that maybe there's a number that Nebraska could give him where he would stay as the DC? What is your, do you think it's, hey, he's good as gone as this point at the end of the season?
Oh, I'm not ready to say that quite yet, because I don't know what's going to open. And
Sure.
I haven't, Matt, I'll tell you, I haven't looked at, I don't know that Tony White I don't know that he'll pop up for SEC jobs like Auburn, for instance. I don't, that's probably not realistic. There will be jobs that are very realistic for him, and we'll be having. It looks like we're going to be having that conversation again, which is good. That's what you want.
Yeah.
We talked about that last year. This is what you want your coordinators to be involved in those conversations. And you're right. God, he orchestrated a great defensive scheme against Rutgers, and it was executed at a high level. It was like you said, a master's class. A master's class is usually beautiful to watch. I mean, it was.
Yeah.
It was interesting. It was extraordinary in some ways to hold them scoreless down by the goal line, 6 plays, it's a 2, all that. Could even been better if Buford makes that pick. I mean, that's the one play where I look at it and go, God, it was so good, but man, he had that ball in his arms, and he himself said it was a good play. It could have been great.
Yeah.
So yeah. So no, we'll be having that conversation with Tony White, and he has the feel of a head coach to me.
Yeah. And I think and I think on Rule's staff, he gives guys responsibility where, they get an opportunity to act like a head coach in their roles. All right, Sip, bye week. What are you doing? Going out of town, hanging out, party, wedding, pumpkin patch, winery,
I'm gonna
apple.
Party. I'm gonna party. That's what I'm gonna do.
Heck yeah, dude! I'll go with you. Where are we heading? We going to Tavern on the Square? We going to the bar? The bar? Where are we going, Sip? Come on, Sip. Where am I taking you?
No.
You got some years left in you. We can let's have a night. Let's party like it's 1982.
I don't have years left. If I'm out, I'll tell you something right now. If I'm out past 10, it's an extreme situation. I am visibly uncomfortable if I'm out past 10.
If Sipple's out after 10, something has gone horribly wrong.
Right. No, I know what I'm going to do.
Horribly right.
I'm going to watch Wisconsin Rutgers at 11.
Okay.
I'm going to watch Penn State USC at 2:30, and I'm going to watch Oregon Ohio State. And I might do something while those are going on, but next to nothing. Next to nothing.
All right, so we'll get you out on this. So, of top 5 teams that could suffer their first loss, would it be Texas, Ohio State, Penn State? You can say all 3, you can say 2, you can say 1, or you can say they're all going to win this weekend on the road or in a neutral site game.
Penn State most likely to lose. Ohio State, that 3-point. Ohio State's favored by 3, which I just regard as a joke. It just feels like easy money. I mean, Ohio State. If Ohio State wins by 13, I'm going to be like, what happened? What?
Sure.
Why didn't they win by more than that? Penn State, it's a great. I mean, think about what we're talking about. Penn State against USC in October. What a beautiful scene.
Mm-hmm.
Penn State, they got the 18th ranked rushing offense. It's a great rushing offense. It's better than 18th. And USC is the 87th ranked rushing defense. You know what the game's going to look like. It's going to be Penn State trying to hammer away. And then it's going to be USC trying to make explosive plays on the other side, because that's what they're going to have to do. Because USC can't hammer away at Penn State.
Nope.
They're going to have explosive plays. But what if USC gets up, 14-3, 17-7, and can't? Then it tests Franklin's patience level on offense. I don't know. I'm very interested in it because think about it. USC needs a win badly. They got 2 losses. I mean, what's it going to look like if USC loses again? You look at the Lincoln Riley tenure a little bit and say, okay, what's going to happen at USC? On the other side, if Franklin loses, you just shrug your shoulder and say, oh, it's another just ordinary kind of. It's a very good Penn State team, but it's still not Ohio State. So it's a great. I love the conversations. I love the matchup.
Yep. Sip, as always, appreciate it. Thank you. We'll talk to you next week ahead of what will be a big game in Bloomington.
Yeah, thank you again, Matt, for those kind words. I mean it.
Of course, Steve.
All right, we'll talk soon. Take care.
Thank you.
The best.